In the year 1938, a fire broke out in the slash of a logged-over area near Campbell River. Before its work was done, that fire had spread southward to Comox and had devastated some 75,000 acres. This was not the first bad fire originating in logging slash, nor the last, but it was one of the biggest, and pointed up the fact that the legislation then in effect, which made the burning of slash mandatory, was of tremendous importance in reducing the hazard which presented such a threat to our coastal forests. Even before the introduction of special legislation incorporated into the Forest Act, many loggers had become fully aware of the dangers of uncontrolled slash fires and had independently adopted policies of broadcast burning over their logged areas as soon as the timber had been removed. However, at that time, no special study of the problem had been made, and no particular techniques had been evolved. Consequently, many loggers were cautious about deliberately firing their slash, and by the late 30s, the slash areas in the Vancouver district were of considerable size and were gradually connecting with one another as logging continued. With the incorporation of slash burning requirements into the Forest Act, which stated that a hazard created must be abated, the logging companies found it necessary to plan their operations with this end in view. The war years saw a revolution in logging methods, a revolution which still goes on. Tractor logging extended into higher elevation areas once considered inaccessible, and marginal timber stands, which had once been bypassed as being uneconomic to log, were now economically feasible. Changes have been made in the requirements of the Forest Act, and undoubtedly will continue to be made. At present, these requirements are not unreasonable and certainly take into account the various conditions that are actually encountered in the field. Basically, the whole policy is founded upon the undoubted fact that buildups of unburnt slash, given the proper weather conditions, will eventually and inevitably cause disastrous fires. Quite apart from the reduction of hazard by controlled burning is the added benefit of a greatly improved seed bed for natural regeneration or for planting. Here we see the difference in growth between a burnt and an unburnt area, which clearly shows the better growth of young trees in the burnt area. A good controlled burn will not damage the mineral soil, but will remove twigs and litter to give the newly planted trees a good start. Standing snags are a fire hazard and are particularly vulnerable to lightning strikes. Their removal contributes to the abatement of a hazard which threatens the new growth. Here is visual proof of the value of slash disposal. Logged years ago with no thought of slash burning, the area has been lost to commercial tree species while the alder, willow, and maple have sprouted like weeds to the detriment of the more valuable conifers. In burning slash, some factors are under our control, some are not. Of the uncontrollable factors, weather is probably the most important. Notoriously unpredictable on the British Columbia coast, its vagaries can make all the difference between a good burn and a bad one. Since it's usually safe enough to predict the weather for short periods, and since a good burn on an average-sized setting can be completed in a matter of hours, long-range forecasts are not essential. Of tremendous importance to the slash burner is the record of what the weather has been up to the time of burning. When did it last rain? How much rain fell? Since the rain, how much sunshine has the slash received? What about wind and its drying effect? All these things help to determine the present condition of the slash. And as the time for burning draws near, the present weather is important. An apparently small variation in humidity can make a big difference in the success of a burn. Wind direction and intensity are of the greatest importance, since it's the rule to burn against the wind and on side hills from the top down. In some areas, particularly in older growth, the forest floor is deeply carpeted with moss. At the borders of logged-off areas, its condition can be of great importance. If it's too dry, then there's a possibility of the fire spreading into unlogged areas, and resulting in fringe damage unless precautions are taken. On a southern or a western slope that receives the slanting rays of the setting sun, we will often find that the moss is tinder dry for a considerable distance into the standing timber along the margin. If we're dealing with a northern slope where the sun cannot penetrate beneath the trees, we'll find the moss and undergrowth will retain considerable moisture, even after a spell of fine weather. Sometimes conditions are such that a certain amount of fringe damage seems almost inevitable unless extra precautions are taken. Such conditions might prevail on a steep side hill where no catguard can be made, and where the moss and undergrowth is dry whenever the slash itself is burnable. The species and condition of the fringe timber itself may constitute a hazard. It must be realized that the actual circumstances in the field conditions will seldom be found to be ideal, and decisions involving compromises must occasionally be made. Here's a setting on a fairly steep slope with a northern exposure so that shade along the top portion prevented drying and resulted in a fringe of unburnt slash next to the standing timber. Planning and preparation are essential requisites of a good slash disposal program. Here we see snags that border the area to be burnt being felled inward toward the fire. To leave them would be to run the risk of their leading the fire into the unlogged timber. Each setting must be thoroughly analyzed. No two are alike. With their local knowledge, those in charge should have a good idea of the best conditions under which each setting can be burned. If the operation is a large one, with several areas to be burnt during the comparatively short period of good weather conditions, the burning crews must be kept as mobile as possible, ready on short notice to be transported to the various settings as the conditions alter. At the same time, it cannot be overemphasized that plans must be flexible, and when a burning plan is not proceeding as it had been hoped, those in charge must be quick to adjust to circumstances. This is a case in point. It was originally decided that 2 men with torches would begin at the highest point and light down both edges for about 200 feet. As soon as these initial fires began to die, the slash between the 2 fires would be lighted. The process would be repeated down the timber edges for 200 feet and then in toward the center, and so on until the bottom was reached. This is good general procedure because once the margins are burnt, it's safe to light the center. About halfway through the operation, it was seen that the plan was not working as well as had been hoped, and that if it were continued, it would result in some areas being unburned by the fire. Consequently, the plan was slightly changed, and the men directed to concentrate on the left-hand side so as to remove a possible hazard to the standing timber there. The torches used here were simple. A wad of waste on the end of a piece of wire, easily transported and easily used. Incidentally, although only 3 men were actually involved in this burn, a suppression crew of some 25 men were in the area and ready to move in with equipment if their services had proved necessary. final result in this case was a good burn, but as can be seen here, the right-hand side was not completely abated. After the burnable slash had been eliminated, planting begins, usually after the first rainfall following the burn. While it's not an easy job, it is, as we can see here, much easier than in an area where the slash is still on the ground. And as we've said, the seedlings will have a better start in the burned area through not having to compete with debris and litter. Here we have two types of settings side by side. The steep slope was a Wiesen show, and because of its steepness, it was impossible to surround the slash with a catguard. Yet the unlogged timber was vulnerable, and some method of protection was considered necessary. Below the Wiesen show was a setting that had been logged by tractors. And here protection was a comparatively simple matter. A catguard was built around the area to be burned. In this particular area, the percentage of decadent and commercially unusable timber was very high, and what may look like waste to the untrained eye is actually an example of the best utilization of the available timber. Notice that the cat pushes the slash inward, away from the standing timber, and that all debris is removed, right down to the bare mineral earth. Here the whole crew is shown the burning plan so that each man will know exactly what to do and what to expect of his companions. In the case of the Wiesen setting, it was decided to protect the standing timber by a system of portable sprinklers. And here we see the tank truck being loaded with water to supply them from a convenient location. A valuable side effect to a good slash burning program is that it gives crews excellent training in the fighting of fires, and also that there's sufficient time to emphasize the various safety precautions that are necessary under more urgent conditions. Working with fire every year, learning how to control it, how to judge its spread, the effect of wind, of humidity, of fog, sunshine, and all the factors that influence fires, they're well equipped to deal with accidental blazes. The best burn is one that passes rapidly over the area and consumes the more combustible portions of the slash, the limbs, foliage, small chunks. The speed of the burn prevents the building up of excessive heat, and if it's seen that a fire is in danger of becoming too hot, it is a simple matter to reduce the speed of firing. Burning downhill prevents too much heat being created, as does burning against the wind and keeping the fire front long and narrow. Occasionally, a burn will be slower than anticipated, or will be fired late in the day, so that burning will continue into the night. Under such conditions, extra precautions with regard to safety must be taken. The burn has been a good one. Inflammable slash has been eliminated, and the fire passed over the area quickly enough so that no damage has been done to the mineral soil. Surprising though it may seem, one of the most difficult burns is the kind that's located on a flat or fairly flat country. While on slopes we have the control of working downhill combined with the control of working against the wind direction, on flat ground we have only the wind and the speed at which the crew works to determine our rate of burning. As in all cases, a survey of the setting to be burned must be made, and a plan worked out well in advance of the burning date. Here, too, it will be noticed that there was a high concentration of decadent timber, which is of no economic value, but had to be felled to reduce its hazard. Once into the slash burning season, a close watch must be kept on all conditions, and as soon as they're judged to be at their best, the plan should be put into effect as quickly as possible. The inflammability of the slash can often be assessed by a small test fire. Weather, particularly humidity, temperature, and wind direction, must be checked. Often it's not possible to wait for rain between logging and burning, and some weight must be put into the long-range weather forecasts in order to pick the optimum time for firing the slash. The missing of an opportunity of good conditions can result in a poor burn or in not burning at all. With conditions just right, the burning crew is quickly called to the setting where they receive their instructions and their torches, and then move off into the slash. This type of torch, completely self-contained, needs no separate fuel can and is favored by some operators. As usual, the actual firing begins at the leeward end of the setting, and the men will work against the wind, burning as they go. This means that inflammable material on the windward side is consumed as the burning proceeds, and also that the men are working clear of the smoke. In order to demonstrate the progress of a complete burn, film was shot at intervals, and the burn seen here actually took about 1.5 hours from start to finish. Notice that the burning proceeds against the moderate breeze, and also that, as it builds up, it creates its own draft so that the smoke and fire are sucked inward from all directions. Successful slash burning is based on a number of factors, and of these, experience is probably the most important. But experience must be coordinated with the other factors into a plan of action. These other factors include a consideration of the long-term logging plan for the area and a realistic assessment of the slash problem. The location, slope, area, kind and density of the slash, proximity of adjacent risks, all these must be considered. The operator's facilities and manpower have a bearing on how his slash will be burned. Using all these data, a plan of burning should be drawn up. Time to go in the fall of the year so as to abate the hazard as soon after it's created as possible and to prevent any slash buildup. Future crops must be prepared for. Present crops must be protected. Until the day arrives when every scrap of wood from every acre of forest land is utilized, leaving no debris to burn or hinder planting, slash burning must be included in the plans of every logging operator. Here on a hilltop not far from Ladysmith on Vancouver Island, we see the results of an excellent burn, excellently planned and carried out. It will be noticed that it's been confined to the slash area, and that within that area, the burning has been uniform, with no unburnt islands left to create a hazard at some future date. The new growth in previously logged settings has not been damaged, and the cleanly burnt area will itself provide an excellent opportunity for planting. And the final result of it all, new plantations of vigorous growth. What we see here is the recommencement of the cycle that must go on if BC's major crop is to be preserved. Each year, the area logged in the Vancouver district has increased until today it amounts to some 90,000 acres annually. To a large measure, the prevention of repetitions of disastrous fires of past seasons depends upon the planned slash burning by our logging operators. It's a credit to the loggers of the province that they have appreciated the importance of slash disposal and that they've carried out this work with tremendous efficiency and dispatch.